How you doing, guys? Big Mac Dan School here again today, back once again with another Conquest video for you. Today we'll be taking a look through the pages of issue 36. It is 36 as well. I forgot what number it was, I just guessed. Right, so what do we get in issue 36? We get 3 paints. 3 paints come into a grand total of £10.25 in the UK with the GW pricing on paints. So we've got £4.75 for the big wash, the Athonian camo shade. We've got a McCrag blue, which we've already got one of at least. Have we had a resupply of that yet? Is this the second resupply of McCrag blue? Possibly, but I'm not entirely sure. And the third paint is Steel Legion Drab, which is one we've not had yet. It's a nice light brown colour, which is good for like leathers, furs, and so on and so forth. You'll see throughout the issue. Firstly though, let's get into the magazine and see what's on the front cover, shall we? So we've got Ultramarines Chief Librarian Tiberius covered in this. Then we've got Recess Shading Your Models, which is nice because we've got a shade paint in here. And then finally, New Psychic Powers. Well, let's look inside. So the first 2 pages, we've got a Deadly Evolution. It talks about psychers, and basically it talks about how psychers spread across the galaxy, especially just after the Age of Strife, I believe. Since the huge warp storms of the Age of Strife, the rate at which humans develop psychic powers has steadily increased. So since the Age of Strife, there's been more and more psychers appear in the galaxy, more and more human psychers appearing in the galaxy, and that's the tendrils of the warp, if you like, sort of infecting people's minds and stuff. Potentially that's what's causing a mutation in the genes and leading to more psychers being born and being abound in the galaxy. Is that a phrase? I don't know. Let's move on. So there's one, like on these first 2 pages, it talks about the stuff that I've just said, how there's loads of psychers, and then on this page it says like 1 in 100 million psychers might become a Space Marine librarian. 1 in a billion might become an inquisitor. The psychers in the galaxy, in the Imperium, they're gathered up by these black ships that come and take them from whatever planet they are found on. They are identified as psychers on, and these black ships are full of psychic wards, if you like. So it nullifies the psychers' powers, and then they travel back through the warp to Terra to be sorted into how useful they can be to the Imperium. Some of them are just put in to the Astronomicon as fuel. That's the guiding light of the Emperor that helps the ships of the Imperium travel through the warp. So some of them are just thrown into the Astronomicon. I say thrown into, I don't know exactly the setup, but I imagine it's some kind of big amphitheatre type room. They put in the place in the amphitheatre, and then they might only live for a couple of days or get burnt out in a matter of hours or something like that, because all of their psychic energy is drained to light this massive beacon that's used to, as I said, help the ships of the Imperium travel through the warp. And then some of them might be a little bit more useful to the Imperium. Well, not a little bit more useful necessarily, but they might be a little bit more suited to another job that the Imperium has. Like they might be useful as an astropath, a telepathic communicator. There's space travel nowadays. When there's I can't think of the right word, a probe sent out into space, I guess. A probe, a satellite? Not a satellite because it's not orbiting a planet. But when a probe is sent out into space, it takes a while for the communications between the scientists on Earth and the probe to take effect. So you might give it a command to change course slightly, but you don't know for sure that it's changed course until you get that data back, and it might take, half an hour till you get that data back that it has heard your command and it's changed course. So imagine that across the whole galaxy, not just across our solar system. The communications take far too long without some other electronic communications take far too long, so they have to look for another type of communication, and that leads to astropathic communication. And I'm going up on a massive tangent now, but that's another one of the uses they might get. Like I said, they might become Space Marine librarians, they might become Inquisitors, they might become sanctioned psychers that work with the Imperial Guard or with other Inquisitors. So that's some uses there. There's also rogue psychers abound in the galaxy. These guys here, they are psychers that have evaded the black ships and want to remain at large, don't want to be put to use by the Imperium. They probably fear their inevitable quick death if they are thrown into the Astronomicon, like the vast majority of psychers are that are identified as psychers. And then there's chaos psychers as well. Now, a chaos psyker is basically a rogue psyker that seeks out and seeks out and courts the attention of demons and of demonic powers to enhance their psychic abilities, and sometimes welcoming a demon into them and things like that. They might lead cults in the galaxy and uprisings against their imperial oppressors as they see it. So then over onto the next couple of pages, we've got the Chronicles of Virulence, a little bit of the storied history of the Death Guard. It's all 41st millennium, the time of rotting. The time of rotting. And I just want to pick out a few little details of here. I'll read the titles of all of it, but we've got Tainted Trophies, where this is a good example of where chaos fights chaos. Mortarion came into conflict with some Cornate forces, and so beheaded... he came into conflict with Imperial forces, beheaded the Imperium's best champions, 7 best champions, and sent these skulls that were then tainted by the Death Guard and used as Death Head's grenades. And they were tainted by the Death Guard and sent into Khorne's realm as like an insult to Khorne. And then we've got the Rust Hounds Arise. This is an interesting example of how when a faction falls to chaos, it's not always an entire faction. Some Knights of House Krast were fighting some chaos forces and eventually succumbed to the masses of chaos, and their war machines became corrupted, and the forces of House Krast that were present then re-emerged as the Rust Hounds. They've got like rust corrosion all over them, and they march out as the Rust Hounds, and they now worship chaos. Another interesting little bit, flicking over to the next page, is the Ulock Breach. Now, I meant to do a bit of research before I spoke about this because it's interesting, but I forgot to do it. Maybe I'll pop it in the post. The Ulock Breach. During the battle for Ulock, Mortarion and his Death Shroud stand unaided in the breach against an entire Necron legion. That's a lot of Necrons. I'm not sure how many Necrons. Maybe I'll put it here now. Maybe I won't if I've not got time. So, an entire Necron legion. Death Guard reinforcements fight their way frantically to their lord's side, fearing the worst. Instead, they find Mortarion and his last surviving Death Shroud, wounded but triumphant and surrounded by sparking, melting heaps of metal. So they slaughtered all the entire Death Guard, the entire Necron Legion, basically. Just Mortarion and his Death Shroud Terminators. So it goes to show the power that a Primarch has, or especially a Demon Primarch, and the capability of war and martial prowess. It goes to show how powerful compared to other beings they are. And then on to the next page, when we get to talk, for the first, I don't know what to do with these pages, they're coming apart in really weird ways, but I'll do my best. So on to the next page, we get to talk about Chief Librarian Tiberius, or Tiberius, commonly known as Tiggy, Libby Tiggy. Title, Ultramarines Master of Arcana, abilities, prescience or prescience, psychic powers, leadership, strategy, war gear, Rod of Tiberius, his big staff here, Hood of Hellfire, the psychic hood, it's a modified psychic hood, and a bolt pistol, like a lot of Space Marine librarians carry a bolt pistol. And over on the next page it covers them in a little bit more detail. So the psychic hood, basically touching on that a little bit more, the psychic hood enables him to control his powers and make them more deadly even than most other librarians. He's one of the most powerful librarians the Imperium has to offer, has to fight alongside it. But just because he's a librarian and he's studious, is all about information and about using his psychic powers, it doesn't mean he's any less of a warrior. It tells you in here that he's as furious on the field of battle, basically, as any Ultramarine champion might be. So, onto the paint guide. Well, hey, we've got Steel Legion Drab on the first page, and it gets us to paint some furs with Steel Legion Drab. It's a really nice little paint guide, this. It's going back to some Death Guard models that we've seen previously, but they just need a little bit more detail to become more complete. And the way they're doing it, I can't really fault it. They're going back in there, touching up various models, and bringing them to a stage where they look almost complete, I think, some of them. I'm just going to flick through these pages because I feel like the paint sections can become quite repetitive. They're talking about recess shading with the Athonian camo shade there. Athonian camo shade is like a dirty green paint, a dirty green shade paint. And it gives you a really nice look for Death Guard armour, I think. And they recess shade the Rhino here, the Mephitic Blight Hauler. Is that what it's called? I can't remember. I think that's a Mephitic Blight Hauler, isn't it? There's a Plague Burst Caster and Mephitic Blight Hauler. Yeah, it's Mephitic Blight Hauler. And it brings them, it pops them out to a really nice level. And some of the models in here as well come to a really nice level. So just definitely check that out in greater detail yourselves when you get the issue. I'll just give you a little bit of a close-up here, a closer view. Hopefully you can see that and it's not blurry or anything. But we'll move on to the next section now. The next section, which is the rules section, of course. And out of nowhere, well, I guess not quite out of nowhere based on what else is in this issue. Out of nowhere, we get some Librarius discipline rules. So the Librarius discipline is one of the disciplines open to Space Marine librarians. And it's got 6 psychic powers listed, and it says any Space Marine psychers can swap their powers on the datasheet except for Smite for one of these powers. You can either do it by picking which powers you want, picking and choosing, so you can just pick the most powerful if you want, or you can pick the most thematic if you're playing in like a narrative campaign or something. That's probably a better time to pick your powers. But to make it a bit more fair, a bit less predictable, rather than just picking the best powers, you can roll for your powers, because they're nicely listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So if you roll for your powers, you might pick one power, you might get one power you really don't want, and one power that you really wanted. So it makes it kind of even and fair. Although if you agree with your opponent, what's the harm in picking your powers, really? And then it talks you through some of these powers on this page. Psychic Scourge, which is basically like a slightly different version of Smite, where you're testing your leadership against your opponent's leadership. You roll a d6 and add your leadership, add your model's leadership, that is, the casting model's leadership. So in the case of a librarian, it's 10 to that number. So in this example, it's 4 plus 10, which is 14. And then the nearby any Death Guard units within 18 inches of your casting model then have to take a leadership test in the same way. So they roll a dice and add it to their leadership value, and their leadership value, the Plague Marines, is only 8. Add it to the dice roll of 3, it gives them 11. Then they suffer some mortal wounds as a result of that. It's D3 mortal wounds if the Space Marine beats their leadership. And Fury of the Ancients is another one listed here as well. You can take a closer look at that yourself. On to the next page where, whoa, we get some rules for the Death Guard as well. Contagion Discipline. I've not looked at this too much myself, but it's good that in the issues most of the time it concentrates on Space Marines or on the Death Guard, and it sort of leaves, if you're collecting it as a pair of players, so if, say, you and your sister, you and your brother, you and a friend are collecting it together, so one of you is collecting the Death Guard, one of you is collecting the Space Marines, it can leave one person feeling a little bit left behind sometimes when the Space Marine player gets new rules, but the Death Guard player doesn't. The Space Marine player gets new models, but the Death Guard player doesn't, and vice versa. However, in this issue, both sides get new rules, which is really nice. And again, the Death Guard psychers can swap out the powers in the same way that the Space Marine psychers could. Moving on to the powers of contagion, described in a little bit more detail there in the same way. Blades of putrefaction and the putrescent vitality powers are both described. Onto the mission briefing. Reach the evac point. This week's mission is all about trying to get your gene seed out of there. So the apothecary's been hard at work harvesting the gene seed of fallen Ultramarines warriors, and he needs to get that out of there onto a transport before the Death Guard can either destroy it or taint it with their nurgly ways. So that's the premise for this week's battle, this week's scenario. And just to give you I'll give you the armies first, I might as well, like I normally do. Oh no, I'll give you the layout first, that's what I normally do first, isn't it? So we've got the Death Guard deployment zone here, 6 inches from this edge. We've got the Space Marines enter from this mat edge. And then there's 2 board edges where the Space Marine players can exit to get to the transport. So the Death Guard army consists of 5 Plague Marines, 12 Poxward, Lord Felthius, Malignant Plague Caster, and a Foul Blight Spawn. The Space Marines have 3 Hellblasters, 5 Intercessors, 3 Aggressors, and 3 characters: the Primaris Chaplain, Primaris Apothecary, and Primaris Librarian. They're 3 pretty tough characters there, or 2 of them at least. The Chaplain and the Librarian can be really effective, especially with the aura powers that the Chaplain has, and with the Primaris Librarian's brand new Librarius Discipline Psychic powers. Onto deployment, like I said, the Death Guard player deploys there, Space Marine player comes in from this edge and has to get out one of those 2 edges. So they're basically moving their way around the road from the bottom of the T, if you look at it as a T here. And the victory conditions, both armies gain 1 victory point for each enemy unit eliminated. It's pretty standard and has been for a while now in these scenarios. The Death Guard player gains 3 victory points if they eliminate the Apothecary. If the Apothecary leaves the board edge, the Space Marine player gets 3 victory points. So the Space Marine player really needs to think about protecting his Apothecary, his or her Apothecary, and maybe going via the fastest route. Although there's a road here that you can travel up, it's going to be a lot quicker just going straight to one of the board edges, isn't it, where you can escape. So don't necessarily think about walking up the road. I don't know why you would, but it's just a little interesting point there. Unless you want to make it a challenge for yourself, and if you're finding it too easy as a Space Marine player and winning every time, then maybe you do want to stay on the pavement or the sidewalk or move up the road. It's up to you, really, isn't it? And the game lasts 5 battle rounds, as most of these games have been doing for a little while now. So that's what's been in this issue. What's in next week's issue? We've got the Rise of Pattern Ruins. Hey, more of them, fantastic. How many Rise of Pattern Ruins have we got on this board? I think we've only got 2 sets of Rise of Pattern Ruins on this board. So that'll be all the terrain for this board now, by the looks of it. And then what have we got the week after in issue 38? We've got a Death Guard character. It is the Plague Surgeon. So that is basically the Death Guard equivalent of an Apothecary. But we've not only got him, we've got another playmat, which is a landing pad playmat. Now, the landing pad playmat has a road going across the middle of it, so it looks to me as though it'll line up with this road here. However, there are 2 different types of terrain features on this playmat. I'll come a little closer, hopefully you'll be able to see. So there's like the Mechanicus terrain, and it does say here, new battle map Mechanicus zone. So it's like a Mechanicus zone rather than a Sector Imperialis zone, as I think this might be called. So it's a different type of layout and everything, but you could connect it with the roads. It's just going to look a bit like a hard transition between the 2 boards. A way to cover that up might be to place a bit of terrain on the edges where it meets and make the transition that little bit smoother by a little bit softer just by placing terrain on the edges. But that all depends, of course, on whether this battle mat is the same size as the one we already have. If it's not the same size, then it probably won't quite line up right. If it's a bit bigger, I hope personally it's like almost 4 foot by 4 foot. That'd be really nice. We can only see, we can see it's a rectangular battle mat, the same as the one we've previously had. So hopefully it's the same size, and hopefully it'll line up nicely. There's a hard transition, like I said, not only between the terrain as a whole, but the pavement or sidewalk here is all metallic, whereas on the previous one it's stone. And just there's all this grid sort of walkways here, metallic walkways, whereas on this one it's like the foundations of a sort of building area that we're seeing here. So it's not ideal, but I think personally there's ways to make that work and make it work as one big battle mat. Hopefully, there's features that appear on both of them, like some of the craters, so it gives you like that ruined sort of city look to it. That's all I've got for you this week. We'll leave it there for now. I'll talk more about the Rise of Pattern Runes next week. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the battlefield.